going around.
Oh, sweet. Okay, cool. All right, this is Heather Shumaker. A lot of you from Acorn Glen have been like eagerly awaiting this. She wrote "It's Okay Not to Share" and Other Renegade Rules for Raising Competent and Compassionate Children.
Wow.
Kids.
That's impressive.
Something like that. Yeah, well, I've been reading it like for 15 minutes every night because that's all I get. But
Did you sign in?
So
Did
yeah, I
you
should
sign in, Ben?
remember.
I didn't sign up.
But I'm gonna let her tell you.
Oh wait, I did sign this one. Okay, good.
Well, thanks, Danielle. Thanks for having me. I wrote the book so that busy parents and teachers could read it in 15-minute increments. Because I know, being a mother of young kids, that that's all we have. So I'm very glad to hear that somebody's diving in and out of that book like that, because it's designed to be able to do that. And if you have an issue on a certain topic like weapon play or trying to introduce death to young kids or something, you can just go right to that part. You don't have to read the book from the beginning to the end. It's in and out. But you can start at the beginning.
Let's go, Jamie.
So does everybody here have young kids in their lives that they're raising at home? And some of you are also teachers as well, or leaders of group. Danielle, the enthusiasm was just dripping off the phone when she called me in Traverse City, so I'm really thrilled to be here. And one of the things that is evident when you arrive at Acorn Glen is that this is a place for play, in the true sense of the word. And if you are here, you already know that. But one of the things she asked me to talk about a little bit more was just why unstructured play is so vitally important for young children, and how we can best support it, and all the good things that come from learning it. So I'm going to talk, I'm going to do a little pep rally for free play, and tell you maybe some surprising things that you haven't about why it's so good. And I'm also going to be a renegade and try to get you to think about some issues in your childhood that are different. Think about it, some ideas, and maybe change your mind on some issues. Because when I wrote this book, I purposely chose the areas that we disagree about to focus my chapters. So it's not your typical parenting book, such as feed your children nutritious food. I mean, that's something we can agree on. Maybe we don't always do it, but we know it's a good. But I purposely chose some of the trickier, dicier topics that we are going to have different opinions on. So I want you to not necessarily agree with everything I say, but I want you to think about it. And I want you to watch your child, because if this is a new idea for you, such as it's okay not to share, for example, sometimes it takes us a while as adults to get back understanding what their needs are. And the children will lead us to the answers that are right for them. It's our job to support them. So this book is a manifesto about play and what I would call true play, because play is really getting a lot of lip service these days. Everybody talks about how play is important, and if you go to any typical preschool program, they will talk about how it's all play-based. But I challenge you, if you go observe that program, as I've observed countless programs, typically play is 15 minutes of downtime while the teacher is setting up the next structured activity. It's that little bit of, okay, you guys go be busy while I get the next thing ready. And it's very structured with, now we have gym, now we have Spanish, now we have this. And for a young child, a lot of that is a waste of their time, because their real learning is taking place in the unstructured time. Play involves taking risks, social risks, creative risks, physical risks, all kinds of emotional risks. And sometimes true play will scare us, because sometimes the children's ideas of what play is are not comfortable for us as adults. So you've chosen this spot for your child because you believe in play, and there's a fundamental level of trust that you have, that your child knows how to spend their time. But we have to remember that children's needs are different than adults' needs. So, for example, how many of you, this very moment, have a compelling urge to run through the living room wearing a Superman cape? Well, yes, I do. Some of you, yes. Or go outside and dig up a mud puddle. You know? Or swing for an hour and a half. Some of us maybe yes, some of us maybe no to some of these things, but kids have a need to do these types of activities. And those examples are ones that we often smile and say, oh, that sounds fun. But they also have other needs that sometimes can scare us. The original title of this book was called Boxing at Preschool. And that's because, yeah, boxing. My mom was a preschool teacher for 40 years in Columbus, Ohio. And this is where I grew up. And she was at a school called the School for Young Children. And this is where I went when I was 4 and 5 years old. And they actually have boxing gloves and wrestling mats as part of the classroom. And they encourage the kids to have punching fights and wrestling matches during the school day. And I did this as a kid, and I grew up, and being an adult, I forgot about it. So when I went back to visit, I was kind of shocked. What? They let the kids punch each other? But it's all play, and we're going to get into what I would call a celebration of roughhousing as part of the thing we talk about today. So this school, when I was a new mother, I looked around for preschool for my children. I looked for a school that was just like the one I had gone to. I figured that's what preschool was like. And I looked around, I didn't see anything remotely like it. There were a lot of tables and chairs. There was a lot of sitting down. There was a lot of academics. And then I realized just how unorthodox my old preschool was. So I went back and I looked at what they did. And one of the key things they do is they don't force children to share a toy if they're busy using it, because they consider that is interrupting a child's play. So then I realized how unique this place was, and I was expecting the teachers there to write a book about it because they're the experts. But the truth was they weren't writers, and they had no interest in writing. And so I interviewed them and interviewed about 75 early childhood educators, and taking the basic philosophy of this school, taking all their unique parts. I mean, just like here they have how to wash your hands over the sink. They have some things that are the same, but all the things that were very, very different is what I chose to write about it. And I was talking to some parents ahead of time. The time is now, because you're giving your kids, by choosing a place like this, you're giving your kids a true chance to have their childhood and to learn at their optimal level. Because right now, play is completely under attack. If you visit a kindergarten classroom, they may have toys in the corner, but as one teacher told me in the town where I live, she said, the toys grow dusty. There is no time in the curriculum to play. And that's for 5-year-olds. So, just as a reminder, free play is not the same as a free-for-all. Some people who don't allow the kids to follow their play ideas are worried about losing control and that free play will just be a free-for-all. It's not. It has limits, and I think that's hugely important for us all to remember, because in a town like Ann Arbor, which is a little bit similar to Columbus, Ohio, with big university, we found that the people with the most PhDs in the family had the hardest time setting limits on little kids. That it varies from family to family, but my mom was laughing. Over 40 years, she found that the families that were university affiliated and were very high level of education had the kids sitting in the middle of the dining room table, eating on the middle of the table, and had no idea that they could control that the child had to sit in a chair to eat supper. So there's some people set limits too much, some people don't set limits enough. But we all need to remember that limits are an important part of giving kids what they need and making room for free play. I think one thing that our culture does right now is that we are quick to limit play, and yet we're very free with behavior. And I think it needs to be switched. We need to make a lot of room for play, but limit behavior. So, for example, one of the mottos that the book follows is, it's okay if it's not hurting people or property. That's a basic guiding principle, whether it's something that happens in daily life or whether it's playtime. If it's not hurting people or property, it's okay. And another one is, this is a huge part of the book about emotions, wild emotions, what to do with those emotions, and emotional acceptance, that all feelings are okay, but all behavior isn't. So you can be mad, but you can't hit your sister. You can be mad, but you can't hit me. You can be mad, you can't punch the lamp. There are limits. You can have the feeling, but you can't have all behaviors. So just to give you, there's 29 renegade rules, and they're all over the place. One of them, there's a bunch about art and creativity. There's ones about introducing sex ed to young kids. There's ones about, it's called Be Buddies with Dead Birds, about welcoming introduction of death in our families. It's a lot easier for a child to begin to understand the concept of death if they meet a dead worm or a dead bird, rather than first experiencing it with the loss of a pet or a beloved grandparent. And young kids are always experiencing those losses of grandparents and pets in these early years. So to even have the basic concept of what life and death is, and that a dead thing won't walk again, the bird won't fly again. My mom keeps dead birds in the freezer next to the ice cream, in a Ziploc. And then when, a bird will fly into her window at home, and she'll pick up the cardinal and put it in a Ziploc and put it next to the ice cream. And then when it's time to bring it into the kids, she'll bring it in and let the kids explore and talk about, well, what is this dead bird, and will it ever fly, and can we bring the doctor to make it better, and all those basic questions. So that's one of the many topics. Also, roughhousing, weapon play, superheroes, social rejection and friendship issues, all kinds of, it ranges all over the place to the tricky things. So here's some things about play. One classroom I went into, they had a water table for kids to play with, and a lot of times as adults we try to stop conflict from happening before it happens with kids. So there was a rule in this classroom that only 3 children at the water table. That was a rule to prevent a conflict of overcrowding. And instead of having that kind of conflict avoidance, you can have as many kids as you want at the water table. If they're starting to feel crowded, well then there's an opportunity to help them work out the conflict. How can we, somebody is not having room at the water table, somebody's feeling that they're being pushed, how can we work this out? Instead of adults always trying to solve or diminish the conflict by making rules like that ahead of time, or by having structured activities where the kids don't have a chance. Because if everything's structured, we don't have a chance to kind of bump into each other and have meaningful conflicts. It's through free play that the kids have a chance to have problems with each other. Another type of play that isn't play is, that I've seen in a lot of schools, is now we're going to, everybody go get some blocks, and we're all going to make blocks in the shape of the letter T. And I've seen that, and they consider that play. And I was like, well, that's a way to show kids what the letter T is, but it's not play. That's play gets a lot of misnames. Also, a lot of enrichment classes, which can be a lot of fun, but if they take up too much of your child's time, they're not actually enrichment. They're the opposite. They're wasting your child's time, such as young sports for kids. Let them chase a ball in the backyard, but driving them all over town and having them spend their time in an organized, structured activity isn't what they need in these early years. But we get a lot of pressure from that. Our culture is, sign up for this, sign up for that, your kid, So there's a lot of ways that play is not play. And the most important thing is they're sleeping about half their lives, half their time. They need to have a lot of unstructured blocks of play. One thing about play that they're discovering is that, especially with the 4-year-olds, when they're beginning to play with each other, more than the 3-year-olds doing the parallel play, that it takes at least 45 minutes for the kids to get into play together, to get into a sophisticated game. It takes about 45 minutes for that play to develop. And then once it's developed, it needs time to unfold. Sometimes I have a 5-year-old and a 9-year-old, and especially last summer, they would play sometimes a pretend game with dress-ups and so on that would go on for 6 hours, taking breaks for eating. But it was the same game that they were able to sustain over a 6-hour time period. That's the kind of time kids need. They need it in blocks of at least 1 or 2 hours. And when play is scheduled into a program that has, now we have 15 minutes for play, now we have half an hour, the level of children's play, their sophistication of their play drops because they don't have time. And so it's the complexity of their social relationships and all the relationships that are going on, the thinking involved, drops down in that kind of play. So as I say, free play, true free play, it's child initiated, it's child directed. So if you want to play with your child, then you are a partner in the play. You're not the one saying, this is how it goes. You tell them what to do a lot. When it's playtime, if you're playing with them, then you're more of the equal partner in the game. It's the best way to encounter meaningful conflict. It's the best way to have kids have meaningful literacy. I'm not a big fan of, this is the letter A type of teaching, and I'll show you some examples in a little bit of what I consider very meaningful ways to introduce the written word through play. Really, I think it comes down to that play meets the two fundamental goals of early childhood the best. And here's what I consider the true work of early childhood. One is to be able to understand emotions, for them to be able to figure out what the emotion they're feeling is and how to express it appropriately. That's huge. How many of you are really, really good at managing your anger? It's hard, right? It's hard. And how many of you were given excellent examples of how to do that as a kid? Okay, this is important stuff. It lasts all our lives. It affects our marriages, whether we're going to get divorced. I mean, this is important stuff. It affects how we keep jobs, how we get jobs, all of our social relationships throughout life. And it's a fundamental skill that we need to guide our children in the young years and ongoing. But if we start out well with it, it happens more by second nature for them. So this is a really, really important life skill, is emotional competency. And most of us don't have any trouble being happy, right? We're pretty good at being happy. It's those negative emotions that we really need to help guide our children in. And the second thing that I consider really the important work of early childhood is coping with conflict. So that we are able, conflict is always, always with us in our lives, whether at the breakfast table, who gets the blue spoon, who gets the bunny bowl, or whether it's nations at war. Conflict is, at all levels, is part of human society. And how, to me, peace is not the absence of conflict, because conflict is with us. It's the respectful resolution of conflict. It's the peaceful resolution of conflict. And that set of skills can begin as young as age 2. And by teaching our kids, if we haven't had great modeling ourselves in how to deal with conflict, then by teaching the kids, we actually model to ourselves how we can do it when we have issues with each other. Adults have a big, big role in guiding kids in these skills. So I do believe in allowing kids to play and not having adults hovering over, but we are needed to guide them when they have some conflicts. It's up to us to help them have some tools so that they can draw on to solve the conflict on their own in the future. And some kids can start solving their conflicts on their own by age 4 without any adults coming in if they have some guidance, modeling, and tools to draw on. So I just wanted to start with the title of the book. I'm going to dive into some of the topics, and this is where you can decide if you agree or don't agree. With sharing, it's okay not to share. This is based on the fundamental children's right of having an object not being taken away from them. So if you're using something, I just come and take it. And then let's say that I want something. Maybe I don't take it from her, but I really want it. She's not sharing. So that's the manipulation that then she has to give it up, right, when she's busy using it. And it feels terrible. If somebody forces you to give something up when you're not done with it, when you could be reading the newspaper and someone's taking it from you, you're in the middle of the article, you want to finish at least. When you're in the middle of something, it feels terrible to give it up. So that feels terrible when you are forced to share, when the adult comes in and says, you have to be nice and share with your friend. Or I'm gonna set the timer 5 more minutes and then it's Jenny's turn. She might need 6 minutes to be done. She might need 2 seconds to be done. She might need much longer. A child's sense of time is very, very vague. But when they are done, they're completely done. You know, they walk away, that's the truck I really wanted, the yellow truck that I really wanted. But when I'm done with it, I am done with it. And it's that moment. So the idea of it's okay not to share is it's turn taking. But it's child-directed turn taking. It's not the adult saying, now your turn is over. It's the child saying, I'm all done now. And learning to stand up for themselves, and when someone comes and wants what I have, to be able to practice positive assertiveness and say, I'm not done yet. You can have it when I'm done. That's setting a boundary on another person. Not bringing the adult in necessarily. That is child to child saying, I'm not done yet. You can have it when I'm done. And so they've set a boundary. They've learned that they don't have to just have things taken from them. And that they can finish what they're doing, which is very respectful. Because if we truly believe that play is optimal learning for children, that's like interrupting you when you're writing your PhD dissertation. You're in the middle of doing it, and then someone's interrupting you. So they're in the middle of doing their optimal learning, and they're being interrupted if you take it away from them. Now, as far as so they stand up for themselves. Then when they're all done, at that moment, when they're done, remind them if they don't remember. Oh, remember Jenny was waiting. And there she is, and they rush across the room and give the toy to the other child, and you just see this radiant glow on the child, on both kids, because it's coming from inside. To develop that generosity, we need it.